There it goes.
Well, good evening, everyone. We're glad that you're here for part 3 of our session. These first 2 slides are just some virtual meeting etiquette slides that we put in there. But everyone seems to know what to do. We've been doing this for a while now. The resources for today can be found at that QR code or on that website that I'll drop in the chat here shortly. And the recordings from part 1 and part 2 are also posted there. I should have taken this one out because this is our last leg. Today is March the 11th. For any of our families who are out there and viewing, we have Texas Workforce Commission. They have a VR office lookup, and that information is available at that QR code as well. Some more family opportunities, family and youth opportunities that are going to be coming up that I'd like to bring your attention to as well. And some additional free learning opportunities at the Region 11 website. So I will put these resources in the chat for you guys here in just a moment as Debbie is going through her presentation, as well as a quick survey and then attendance link for any educators that are interested in CPE credit. We value your feedback, and I look at every single survey that is completed, and we certainly appreciate you taking time on this Thursday evening. So Debbie, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started and let me stop my share, let you go ahead and move forward.
All right.
I hope I was sharing my screen.
I did not see your screen, but no one said anything, so I thought it was just me.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that's okay.
All right, I'm sorry. I just thought it was something I had done, so I kept looking at the chat to see if anyone else said anything. Sorry, Carla.
I'll put all the items in there, you guys. It's okay.
Maybe we need to show that QR code at the end so that they can access that.
Sure.
Okay. Well, this is person-centered approach to employment and talking about the role of the parent. Now, Christy, I know you haven't been in before. Brandy, you were. Kara, is this your first session? Okay. And Christina, what about you?
No, I've been to all 3.
I thought so. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, great. So I'm going to try to catch people up a little bit in what we're doing. But today, as I say, we are in the third session. So far, what we've talked about is the concept of important 2 and important 4. Important 2, giving you a person a good quality of life, the things that give them a sense of happiness. That might be people they hang out with, it may be places they go, routine, the things that make them really have a good quality of life. And important 4 are those things that give you health, safety, dignity, and freedom of fear. And you need to have a combination. You can't have only things that are important to a person, nor can you only have things that are important for a person, but you have to have a combination of both. And so we've talked a lot about that as a foundation of person-centered planning and person-centered thinking. Today that's always included in anything I do because it's a foundation of supporting anybody, whether it's a person that has no disabilities or a person that has a difference. So today though, we're going to talk about skills from the LifeCourse training. And the 2 things we're going to talk about is the integrated support star, which we talked about last week, and the LifeCourse Trajectory. And as we talk about those, we're going to really look at self-advocacy, vocational preparation. How do you use that? Earlier, before the session started, Christy, you were talking about helping parents create an IEP that meets a person's long-term goals. And that this life course trajectory is absolutely wonderful to give parents and the individual a vision of what they want and a vision of what they want to avoid. So I think it's going to be very helpful for you as you're thinking about what an IEP should, how you build in transition with an IEP. Earlier, Christy was also talking about that she had come more from the elementary background and that really hadn't had to do a lot with transition. And I couldn't let it stay like that. I had to mention that transition is not something that happens when a student turns 14, 16, 18. I say everybody is in transition, whether you have a disability or you don't have a disability, from the moment you're born. And you should always be planning for transition. I'm an outside consultant and I spend most of my time now working with families and people with disabilities. And my clientele is pretty much from about 7 years old to 57, because transition is a process that goes on over a lifespan. So last time we talked about the integrated support star, and we talked about that when you look and think about an individual, and everybody needs supports to be successful. None of us are independent. And when parents say, I want my child to become more independent, I'm the first to say, no, you want your child to be interdependent and know how to access the things they need. As I say, none of us are independent. If you go to a hairdresser to cut your hair, if you have somebody help you with your taxes, if you have somebody that comes in, helps in your house or does anything for you, you are not independent. Every one of us depends on other people to provide us that support. So this integrated support star is a way of thinking about the supports that we get from different people. And the first one is that personal strengths and assets. All of us bring our own personal strengths that give us our support. So that's where it begins, is thinking about the individual. The next area that we look is relationships. It can be family, friends, neighbors, co-workers, community members. I say if it's a relationship, it means that you can call them by name. And I emphasize that idea of call them by name, because I work with a lot of people with disabilities and I'll say, well, tell me, who are your friends? And they'll say to me, oh, the kid that sits next to me at lunch. Well, what's their name? I don't know. Then that might become a goal to help him learn he or she learn people's names, but they're not a friend if you can't give them a name. So when I think about relationships, those are the people you can actually name. Then there are other eligibility specific groups that we can rely on. I had to do this I'm certified in the LifeCourse skills, and I'm an ambassador and I had to take a class, a set of a course to prepare for this. And when I did that eligibility specific, I'm like, okay, what's my eligibility specific thing? What is it? I don't have a disability. What are my eligibility? And then all of a sudden it hit me. I'm over 65. Yes, I am proud of it. And my eligibility specific were AARP. I get Medicare. Wow, yay. But that's eligibility specific. And I happen to be Roman Catholic, and my being Roman Catholic gives me eligibility specific opportunities that I can participate and take part in. So I'm also, another thing I just learned, now that we're getting out a little bit more after COVID, is that my health insurance makes me eligible to join a lot of gyms for free. That's eligibility specific. So when you think eligibility specific, think outside the box. The next area that we look at is community-based, and you think about, well, businesses, church faith groups, parks and recs. when I work with students that are in high school and I'm thinking about their transition, I really push towards these community activities. Where can they go? Because school disappears. And where is a person going to be? And so that they can have friends, that they will have the frequency to see people and the proximity so that they can keep those friendships. Because for a lot of students, the only community-based activity they have is public school. So we have to think outside of it. And then the last area that we look at with the integrated support star is technology. And nowadays with technology, technology gives us all so much more support than we could ever imagine. I don't know about you, but I am what I call a very creative speller. My spelling is extremely creative. And if you join this, you might need to write this down to get the joke on it. I have a shirt that says, "Creative Spellers Untie." Figure it out. You got it, Christy. What is it?
Creative Spellers Unite.
Yes. So it's a creative spell. So for me, that little red line that appears is my friend. I love that little red line, but that is a support that I use. Another one that I use when I was with COVID, I wasn't seeing my clients at all, except virtually. And I have some clients that have just moved into their own apartments and they really wanted to learn to cook. I can't tell you how many things I've cooked up using FaceTime. I bought the ingredients, they bought the ingredients, and we made stew, we made chili, we did all sorts of different things because I couldn't be with them. I couldn't have done it without technology. So technology is another area that we need to look at for our supports. And when we're thinking of transition, we have to be using this. It's a great tool to use when you're sitting down with families and you're helping families think about how the vision can, how their dreams can happen. How are they going to manage when they don't have that special ed teacher there supporting their child? And then the second strategy that we talked about was the life trajectory worksheet. And we're going to talk more about that, thinking about what's the vision for the good life and what's the vision for what you don't want to have. And for families, a lot of time, it's easier for them to think about their fears than it is about the vision for the good life. And so we address both of those. And I have some samples of that tonight that we're going to go through. So when we think of the LifeCourse trajectory, we think just about that word trajectory. Trajectory is a long-term pattern of stability and change, which usually involves multiple transitions. When I think about that stability and change, one of my favorite expressions that I used to use when I supervised a group of educators was shift happens. And we just have to know that shift is going to happen and we have to embrace it. We can't run from it. And then we also know that transition is a change in roles and status that represents a distinct departure from prior roles and statuses. So that's why I say transition is lifelong. You know, if you're in, if you're 2 years old and you're receiving services and supports, and then all of a sudden you turn 3, your status changes. The rules change. It's a departure from the prior rules. And you need to think about that as a transition. Now, I am retired, and I had a huge transition when I left public school. I say I graduated, and I started my own business, but that was a huge change in status and roles, and a lot of work had to be done to support my transition. Then there's the turning point, and that is a life event that produces this lasting shift in the course trajectory. So the example I just gave, my turning point was my retirement. Sometimes for my clients that are older, oftentimes the turning point that why I get involved is because the parent has died. And all of a sudden, that's what's going to happen. The siblings call and say, what do we do now? Big turning point for the students that you serve is when they graduate from public school. In a life event, it's an abrupt change. That could also be, as I said, it could be an accident that the person has. It could be a change in status. It can be a positive thing, not just a negative thing. Sometimes it can be abrupt change, could be that the student, or the adult or student, all of a sudden gets a Medicaid waiver. That means there's going to be a change, and it's going to have long-lasting effects. It doesn't have to be negative, but each life stage influences the next. So, and I think if you consider your own lives and consider how you got to the place you are today, that way you got to that place you are today is because of your previous experiences. And all of our previous experiences can lead either to our good life or to what we want to avoid. So when we look at the life course trajectory, we consider that. So when we consider the life course trajectory, and those of you who've been with me previously, sorry for the repetitiveness of some of these slides, but when Carla and I talked, we recognized people would be coming in and out of the session. So I do apologize for that. But the vision for the good life always addresses that important to and important for. When I work with a client, I spend time determining what's important to and important for. If you were with me with the other sessions, you might remember the 2-minute drill that we did. And with the 2-minute drill, we say, imagine I'm coming to take care of your child. Tell me everything I need to know to take care of them. And in that time frame, I'm going to find out all those things that are important to a person and important for a person. The vision is identified the person that's supported by that integrated star. And I shared last time, my granddaughter, who is now 5.5, when we identified the good life, my granddaughter did not identify her good life when she was 3 years old. Her mom and dad identified her good life. And it's kind of fun because now we've done several of the plans, and now my 9-year-old granddaughter sits in, and she definitely identifies what that good life is going to be for her sister. But it's either identified by the person or the people that support them. But the vision for the good life was the purpose is to move a person towards that community life. And with those of you who were with me before, you might remember that arrow. And that where we talked about the community life meant that important to and important for was present. The person has an active support, active circle of support of people that are not paid to be in their life. And also the individual has a purpose. And purpose for life is so important. So we really want to be thinking about that for the students as they're moving forward, is what's their purpose? So the trajectory provides the answers of what's the vision for the good life, what do you want to avoid, what past life experiences have led to the good life, and what future life experiences do you want to lead to the good life and avoid the bad. So what we're going to do now, and I'm going to ask for participation if at all possible. You're a small group, you can't hide. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at Jerry, and we're going to do his case study using LifeCourse tools. And so this is Jerry's integrated support star right now. And when we look at Jerry's integrated support stars, we're going to find out that that his personal strengths are that he's friendly, he tries hard, he's been a trainer for the football team, he's an A-B student with modifications, and he's a good soccer player. So that's where he is right now. Where are his present relationships? His mom and his dad. He's got siblings, Joseph, Candace, and Carl. And this is on your handout on page 2. So you can look at page 2, and that's on the handout. Um, Other people that are in his relationship is his Aunt Becky, his Uncle Joseph, and his cousins. He's got friends, George, Matt, Mindy, Mark, and Kevin. All can be named. And at school, he's got Miss Petticott and Mr. Olson. So these are people that are presently in his relationships. His eligibility specific, he's a student at Paul Smith High School. He's received special education service, and he also can go to the Navy base commissary. So he has those as eligibility. Now, his community-based is he's a member of the Methodist Church and also the Recreation Center. Notice you could put member of the Methodist Church here under community, or you could put it under eligibility. It all depends on what you're doing as far as taking advantage of it. And then technology, he uses a smartphone, the computer, and the Xbox. So what we've done is we've looked at what is his integrated STAR presently. And we're going to look at his life course trajectory. And as we look at his life course trajectory, your assignment is to be thinking about what future strengths does he need to create. And Christy, if you're working with families, this is helping to think about what are some of the things that they want to learn. And this could be leading to your goals and objectives as well. But what else does he need? You're going to look at what other relationships does he need. This might be when you're looking at, does he need to, if the person has intellectual developmental disability, and this is a case I find a lot of times when I work with individuals, is that they've never even contacted the local authority. And so a relationship that they may need to develop in the future might be something with, that would go under eligibility for the future. Relationship in the future might be other friends. It might be, it may be teachers at school that he needs to get to know, different people. Eligibility specific, would have been like the local authority, or it could be Texas workforce, but these would be eligibility specific. Then community-based in the future, and technology. So as we go over Jerry's life course trajectory, I want you to think about what else needs to be added to his integrated support STAR. So this is Jerry's vision for the good life. He wants to go to college. He wants to have a job working in the sporting industry or taking care of people who are elderly. He wants to travel to all the NFL football stadiums, and he wants to be married. Now, this idea right here of have a job working in the sporting industry or taking care of people who are elderly, this is typical of a student. They don't have just one plan. And I know I was working with one of my clients who's potentially eligible for services, and they go to private school. So I was helping them access things that public school just automatically would give. But when we were working with it, and my client was saying, well, I kind of like to do things with animals, and I'm really good at drawing. I'd like to do something with arts and crafts. And you know what else? I really would like to be a fashion designer. Now that's a common thing that happens when you're talking with a 17-year-old, right? And I felt so bad. It was a wonderful Texas workforce counselor we were working with. She goes, I'm so sorry, but I have to only have one written down because my forms require it. So the beauty of this is it's not a form driven. You can let a person have more than one outcome because that's life. I don't think we can expect somebody to say just one. But that's Jerry's vision for the good life. What Jerry wants to avoid is living at home, have a job just sacking groceries at Kroger, flunking out of high school, be benched from the soccer team, and get out of shape. So this is what that's what he wants to avoid. So now let's see what Jerry has done in the past that has led to the good life. So his past experiences is that he's volunteered at Helping Hands serving Thanksgiving dinner. He gives rides to people from Silver Oaks Retirement Center to go to church. He's watched I'm watching how hard my brother works at college, so I know I have to do better. I'm an amazing soccer and I'm amazing at soccer and football. The coach said that I could be a kicker for the football team. Mom says I used to have modifications in social studies and science, and now I have accommodations. And I am super persuasive, and I have sold the most tickets for the church raffle. So these are the experiences that he's had for his good life. Now, let's look at what has happened in the past that has led to what he wants to avoid. I failed math because I wouldn't go to tutoring. I signed up to volunteer at Feed My Starving Children, but I didn't show up. I'm not sure of what my accommodations are. I only stayed for the first 15 minutes of my ARD meetings, and I asked to be dismissed. I get in trouble every time that I hang out with George. I forget to turn in my homework, and I don't like to go to the SPED office. So these are the things that have led to what he wants to avoid. The power of this process is amazing, because when I sit down with a student and when I do this, it's their self-realization. Now, he needed a little help to come up with some of these things, but he really opened his eyes to the decisions that he was making that were leading to what he wanted to avoid. So from there, we sit, we talk, we come up with different ideas, we brainstorm lots of ideas, but we only write down what the person agrees to. When I do a trajectory with somebody like Jerry, I try to get that student to put some of this in their own handwriting. Now, sometimes it's too hard for them to write, and then I might scribe for them, but I'm going to be asking them questions like and I'm going to be saying, well, how do you spell that? Or asking things to make sure that they feel that they're involved in this process, because this is not something that's done to a person, it's done with a person. So now let's see his future life experiences. And this kind of becomes the plan of where we're going to go from there. A volunteer at Feed My Starving Children or at Silver Oaks, because remember, part of his vision is to possibly have a job taking care of older people. Apply for a job at Ross Sporting Goods and save money for college. Again, that fits where he's wanting to go, as possibly in sporting. This summer, volunteer with the kids at the rec soccer team. Follow up with the football coach to see about being a kicker. Contact Texas Workforce to get help with college prep, and we're going to talk more about that potentially eligible and that part of it. Talk with the school counselor to find out about colleges that provide more academic support. Tell my teachers about my accommodations. Go to all tutoring. See what are 504 accommodations. Use my phone for alarms, keeping up with assignments, and recording notes. So I'm going to give you just a minute looking at some of this, and I want you to jot down something in each of those quadrants of that star as to what does he need to do, who does he need to include in that integrated star of support. Okay, and these are some of the experiences that Jerry wants to avoid. Experiences to avoid are hanging out with George and his friends, not taking my Abilify, making excuses and lying about having finished my homework, and avoid going to the special ed office. Interesting, when this one came up was, I don't think his parents even knew he wasn't taking his medication. But it came out that he wasn't, and he thought maybe that's what the problem is. And I find that over and over again, even as I work with the adults as well. As a matter of fact, I've got a client that has to text me every morning to let me know that he's taken his medications. So that's an ongoing thing. And he's, I think, 30. So now this is just a picture of the whole thing together. Now I want you to think about, and you can give me anybody in any area, does anybody have any personal strengths that he needs to increase and learn?
He's a good soccer player and he wants to coach kids. So he needs to learn how to coach or how to teach it.
All right, good. He needs to learn some coaching skills. Excellent, because that's something. Is there anything else, a personal strength that you might see he might need or gain?
Well, I was thinking when you mentioned that he was driving, I think it was seniors.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that right there within itself could be defined as self-employment. He could become a rideshare service, which would lend itself very well to him earning cash for this travel that he wants to do in the future.
Good. So the skill he might learn, one of his personal strengths he might need to learn is some things with money management for his own business.
Sure.
Okay, great. Anything else?
I was thinking, since he's friendly and a replacement behavior instead of hanging out with George, since we're trying to avoid that, replacement behavior might be to make new friends that would be better suited for him.
Okay, and that probably would go here under relationships, but
Okay.
for personal strength, it might be that he might learn how to interact with strangers or people he doesn't know. But the idea of the people is great, and that would go there. So what are some other relationships that he might want to build on besides that in the future?
Well, he mentioned something about trainer for the football team. So that's going to entail first aid, that kinds of things. So maybe relationships with someone that could help him with that.
Yeah, it could be the trainer from the football team because they all have trainers too. But then again, that adds to his personal strengths, and you'll see the things get all connected. What about eligibility specific? Is he going to be contacting?
If he wants to go to college, he's going to have to look at, contact them and find out eligibility.
Okay.
Yep. The Disability Services Office is one of the ones I wrote down.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Texas Workforce.
Absolutely.
Texas Workforce is one of the agencies that he's going to be looking at connecting to as well. Yeah. Okay. Community. Was there anything new in the community that you saw?
He might be able to volunteer at like Lifetime or 24-hour fitness or any of those kinds of things, since he is kind of into the rec and leisure in his neighborhood.
And technology, anything in the future? Carla, you've got one. If he's going to be an Uber driver, he's got some technology stuff he's got to learn based on that.
That's right. Using that app and picking up people and navigating. That's right.
So when you're working with a student and you're using these tools, what I suggest is that you use them simultaneously, just like we did now, is that you look at the LifeCourse Trajectory, you help them create that plan, then you pull this out and you help them take the next steps. But it's a brainstorming session, and I've done it just with the students alone, and then I've also done it with students and family members. And as I said, with my granddaughter, we did it without my granddaughter present, just with the parents. But I've done it just with the students. And when I think about transition, and I'm trying to find out what that student wants, it works beautifully, because when the student, I think I talked about this in the first session, sometimes when you ask a student what they want in the future, they love to give you a shock value. I'm going to sell drugs. I think I used that as an example of the first one too, is I'm going to sell drugs. I write it down. Okay, you're going to sell drugs. And I write that down as their goal. I don't tell them it's a stupid goal. It's not realistic. I let them write it down. Then we go back, and I'm probably not going to start with what were the things in the past that led to what you want, but thinking about, I might be asking, well, who do you know that might help you get this job? Well, where are they now? In prison. And so it takes longer when somebody does that, but I'm going to tell you, in my experience is that if you take the time up front, everything else falls into place so much better. And this is a tool to use for that. So there were my ideas. Yours I like better. But some advocate for accommodations, because remember, he was dependent on everybody else. Able to identify where he needs help and ask for it, because right now he doesn't do that. Follow through with assignments and responsibilities, and able to save money. But those are the things that we came up with. Relationships in the future. Pastor Kingsley, Scott, and of course you couldn't do this because you didn't really sit down with him, but these were Pastor Kingsley, Scott Thomas at Feed My Starving Children, the manager at Ross Sporting Goods, Coach Sanders, Miss Peters, the volunteer manager at Silver Oaks, and Miss Hart, the TWC contact at my school. So those were really specific, and I like to see them really looking at names. Eligibility specific. You all talked about the college student. Eligibility would be 504 services, get discounts at Ross Sporting Goods. And then community-based for the future. We talked about the rec soccer team and volunteering at Feed My Starving Children. And in the future for technology, the calendar to keep up with assignments, the alarm on the phone, voice recording on the notes section of the phone, and maps on the phone. So these were the things we came up with. I loved your ideas. The difference is this is real, and it was with a person I sat down and did it with. So that's where the names were. That's where the relationships were. The reason we were pushing the Feed My Starving Children was I said, if you're going to get into college, you need to have good recs. Who's going to write you a good recommendation? That's kind of how some of those things happen, but you weren't privy to all of that conversation, but it's a real person. And that was the steps that we got to this point. Questions about that? Oh, here's a question that I usually get asked. How long does this take? Is that in anybody's mind? How long does this take? Well, for Jerry, we did it in a 2.5 of periods, not all at one time. And so it was coming in to meet with me. And when I'm doing it and I'm working with a family or working with a person individually, I say 2 hours if I do it from start to stop. And I can, but to me, I know that sounds like some time you may not have, and I understand all that, but I'm going to tell you, put time in at the front and things are going to be easier for you throughout the whole process because they own it. So here's another guy. This is Graham, and we're going to talk a little bit about Graham. Sorry. Graham is real. It's not his picture. Graham attends school in the mid-cities, and this is his vision for the good life. Attend college with academic and dorm living. Parents had a lot. The social life and volunteers and opportunities to learn vocational skills. Definitely parents' words, not his. keep relationships with lifelong friends and make new ones. Well, also the other thing that was interesting about Graham, we did change it a little bit, but when he put in his application for, he was looking at Texas A&M program, we put this in with his application process, because they have those schools for people with, so this was part of his application process. Keep music in my life as a hobby or recreation. Continue my spiritual relationship, intense daily workouts with other people, play on a sports team, eventually live in my own apartment that's close to my family, get married and have my own family. What I don't want is to have a job that doesn't use my skills, lose my academic and work skills, have limited relationships, have my life revolve around things that are only important for me and not important to me. So that was the vision. His past experiences, and I did change the names of the places because I don't want him just easily identified, but the facts are the facts. Worked at REMAX summer 2018, 5 days a week from 9 to 2 through TWC SEALS program. Was motivated to earn my own income. I used Uber and corrected the driver when he took the wrong turns. I used a credit card for my own needs and wants, made my lunch that I carry to school. I fixed meals for myself and my family. I'm a part of a weekly youth group at church. I volunteer weekly in a first grade church class. Attended week-long overnight camp for 6 years. Participated in the University of North Texas summer program through TWC. I'm a team football player for middle and high school, varsity football team player for high school, participated in daily rigorous exercise, active and independently participate in group and weekend retreats, has been in general education classes since age 3, meets classroom expectations by planning for them, uses a cell phone to arrange activities to meet up with my friends and request help when needed. So what we're really wanting to project, again, this was part of his college application, is to show why he was so worthy, because I think, Carla can correct me, but I think it's 13 or 15 people, that's all that's accepted to that program. And he applied to about 5 different programs around the country, and he is now at one at the University of Arkansas that's called Empower. But this was part of his, as I say, his application. Past life experiences led to what I don't want. I worked at a grocery store through Earn and Learn. It was not based on what I wanted to do. The aide has had close proximity and may have decreased others' impression of his abilities. That means he did not say it. That's one of the things with person-centered planning and thinking. If it's in first person, he said it. If it's in third person, somebody else said it. People that don't know me have set low expectations for me based on my eligibility. He's very difficult to understand because of Down syndrome, and people they just immediately think he has nothing to offer. I'm hard to understand. Oh, there it is, because of my articulation, and people don't want to take the time to understand what I'm saying. They try to answer for me. So then we planned his future life experiences that to continue get new work experiences so I can have a better understanding of a variety of jobs, be interviewed by a work supervisor prior to getting an internship or volunteering, volunteer in the first grade Sunday school class and have mom fade her support, decrease the support provided by the aide during the games. He plays football on the football team, and there was always an aide with him, and that aide was taking away from him being able to be himself. Talk to the coach about supporting the football team as a manager after graduation, because he wants to still be part of the school activities. Consider being part of one of the booster clubs so he can continue to participate in high school football. Now you're seeing we're looking at a lot of different community groups to participate in. Learn to take direction from the employer versus the school staff. Consider receiving support from the district through the transition program for 1 year, and then consider enrolling in college away from home. So that was some things we talked about. Look for opportunities to volunteer at the church as an adult and not through the school program. Use Uber or Lyft and have the application on his phone. continue learning academics as they relate to work, recreation, and civic responsibility, including voting and general knowledge. Who do you think said that? Do you think that Graham said it, or do you think his mother might have said that?
Mother.
Everybody has it, but it's recorded. But you can tell what he said and what somebody else said by looking at whether it's first or third person. Life experiences to avoid doing janitorial work. His parents have been super active. I started working with Graham when he was in 5th grade. And I worked with him as a matter of fact, his mother called me and she wants me to meet with the college through Zoom in a few weeks to update the trajectory. But the school really was pushing janitorial work, cleaning the tables, working in the cafeteria, those type of jobs. And so they don't want to do any more of that. Doing tasks at the transition program that he's already mastered and parents can teach him, such as cooking. At the particular transition program, they said, well, we'll teach him to cook, we'll teach him this. And the parents were like, no, we don't want that. We can do that. We want other things taught. Not being challenged so he loses his skills. Work in the community with large groups of other students who are in the transition program. So it was real clear what they wanted. This young man never went to the transition program. He went directly to college, and it's his freshman year at college. So it's a real example, but it shows you the vision for the good life. It gives a plan of action, and it lets people know what they don't want as much as what they do want. And it focuses on important 2 and 4. Okay, this is one more. I'll do Tony pretty quickly because I wanted to show you Tony, because when we look at Tony's plan, this is Tony's vision for the good future, for the good life. So I'm kind of wanting to show you examples of different people. And so for him, he wants to go to a 4-year college where I can play football. Preferably, he wants to go to Oklahoma University. He wants to join the Omega Delta Pi fraternity. He wants a job with web design or anime. I don't know if I spelled that right. He wants to travel to all the continents. He wants to live in Los Angeles or New York City, and he wants to have a Tesla. So that's his vision of what he wants. What he wants to avoid is work in my parents' business, have a no-end job, have to live at home, and not get to play football. So now when we look at his past, you're going to see why these things make sense. You might have looked at that and go, where does that come from? Well, when we look at his past that led to the good life, he was a kicker for the high school football team his junior year. The recruiters have shown an interest in me. I see a sports personal trainer 6 times a month. Dad and brother went to OU and were in the Omega Delta Pi fraternity. See where it's all coming from? I used to have modifications in language arts and history, and now I only have accommodations. I don't like people knowing that I get SPED support. I got a 500 in the reading section of the SAT without extended time. Since 12, I have volunteered at my church and youth group. I'm almost finished with my Eagle Scout project of building a website for the youth camp. I earn money by mowing lawns for 15 people for the past 2 years, and I've traveled with my parents to Europe and South America. So now when you see his past, then you're seeing how that led to what his trajectory is. And like from the beginning, I said, everyone's trajectory is based on your past life experiences. So his past life experiences are very different. The past experiences that led to what he doesn't want is I didn't get to play football for 1 marking period during my junior year due to grades. I don't like going to tutoring or sped room for taking my tests. I had to sit out half a season my sophomore year because of a torn ligament. Modifications in math will not be as accepted as an accommodation at college. I didn't turn in paperwork on time to get the extended time for the SAT. I got a 390 in the math SAT without extended time. I've overspent my allowance and couldn't do things I wanted. I had a summer part-time job at a yogurt store and I was let go because I was too late too many times. Even with my extended times, I have difficult getting my assignments in. I only have 1 year of Spanish and 1 year of sign language as my foreign language requirement. Now, do you think this guy might have a hard time getting into OU? Yeah, I think so. But again, it's that self-discovery. So what are they going to do? He's going to meet with the TWC representative and request counseling on post-secondary opportunities, contact OU to determine the SAT and ACT requirements, talk to somebody from the Disability Resource Center. I'm not going to read each of these things. You can glance over it. With him, what happened was it was self-discovery. What do you think happened when he contacted OU to determine the SAT and ACT requirements? What do you think they told him?
Low scores.
Scores weren't high enough. Now, could I sit there and tell him that they weren't high enough? There's no way. This was a real example of self-discovery. This was one of them. We came and we met the next year. But I want you to see that it's not all roses and beautiful. It's not that everything turns out. It doesn't. Because through self-discovery, they find out they need to do something else. Does he have to go to OU? There are other options. But it was his self-discovery. And then experiences he wants to avoid is not keeping up with my bank account, classes being modified so I can't go to college, not going to tutoring, and continue to not write down assignments. But by writing it down, spending the time listening, it helps the person determine what's possible. In the last session, I mentioned that I really don't like to say, that's not realistic. I never say to a student, their vision is unrealistic. What I'm going to say to that student is, that's a great dream. How are you going to achieve it? And that's what this process does, is it breaks down the dream and addresses how are you going to achieve it. And that's the purpose of it's not a one-shot thing. It's, if you're going to do it, it may be done, over more than 1 year. Yeah, it's time consuming. I'd be a liar if I didn't say it wasn't. But if you really want to have the outcomes for transition, and that's why I was really hoping more parents would be at this session, because I think this is a tool that I love parents to have and to use. As I said, my granddaughter, we're using it, and it's amazing because they're like, how did you get the IEP to say those things? And my daughter says, well, it was in her trajectory. And so it helps the parents better express what it is they're wanting for their son or daughter. So I'm not going to do this because, well, let's see. So when you're looking at charting his integrated support star, looking back here, who are some of the people and some things that would need to be added to his support star? What about his own personal skills? Anybody have any ideas of things that he might need to gain?
Some time management skills.
Time management, for sure. Yeah. What else?
I'm just curious, did he ever discover or self-discover community colleges?
Yes, that's what happened, was the community college. And also through TWC, that didn't work too well, kept with TWC, and then he ended up doing something through a trades type program that Texas Workforce helped pay for, actually.
Got it. Thank you.
Well, he also needed to learn how to self-advocate. That's almost always a skill that's needed. And so what about, excuse me, eligibility would you be looking at? It would be TWC because he hadn't previously done that. But anyway, I'm not going to belabor this, but I want you to see that each one of these plans leads to that integrated support star. Because when a student ends services, we have got to help them know where they're going to be getting their support. And their support is not going to be from just one place, but helping them see all the areas where they can get support. So when we're thinking about these life transitions, they are all these different times in a person's life. They are when they turn 18 and leaving school at 18 or 21, when they're living the adult life. Right before I got on this call, I was working with another client that I have who has Down syndrome, and she's really wanting to live in her own apartment. And she's an amazing woman. And actually, she's made a movie. She starred in a movie. She's all this sort of stuff. Unbelievable. But we're really having a hard time figuring out how to get her to this part of living her adult life. Many of my students, as the parents turn 65, that becomes a big area of transition for individuals, because if the parents take their Social Security, their child all of a sudden takes that and gets their part of their Social Security, and it changes all parts of how much money they can make. It changes all sorts of things about their Medicaid and Medicare. And then the other big one is the parents have passed away. Now what do I do? So these transitions go all through life. And some of the things that we need to really think about are these opportunities that we have to give individuals, all people. And sometimes for people with disabilities, parents don't see that they need to, that these life experiences are equally important. I know most of you probably are very familiar with the article Dignity of Risk. And dignity of risk is the right to make mistakes. And for the student I showed you wanting to go to college, he made a lot of mistakes. He had the right to make those mistakes, but it was our responsibility to help him learn by those mistakes. So when we plan for the good life, I like to talk about what does that mean and how do we do it? What does a parent do? Because again, glad you all are here. Wish parents were here because this is really geared a lot to the parents. But one of them is the responsibility for doing chores. I can't stress that enough. When a person I work so much with families and I'll say, do they do any chores? Well, no, they really can't. And again, I think I mentioned before, I tend to work with individuals who are the most significant challenge or challenge us the most. They have no challenges. I'm challenged to figure out how to support them. But they're not asked to do chores. Another one is for them to use an allowance to support independence. And I'm a true believer in giving kids allowance and helping them understand that money is used to purchase things. Excuse me. I have oftentimes the individuals that I support have no concept of money. And when we talk about money and we talk about what happens in the schools, they're doing worksheets. A worksheet does not teach you. If you have a disability and have a hard time transferring, looking at a worksheet's not going to help with that money. I also have a problem with you using fake money. A quarter made out of plastic does not weigh, feel, or anything the same as a quarter made out of metal. When I was in the classroom and teaching, every year I used to just get all the change. And, you know, after a year's time, maybe I had $4 stolen or lost from that money that I brought in, but they used real money. But that's in the classroom. I think the family has a lot of responsibility here in that idea of giving an allowance so the student learns to use their money for what they want. I'm sorry, I have allergies here. Also, there's job exploration, and job exploration doesn't have to just be done at school. When I talk about job exploration, I work with kids of all ages, and excuse me, I'll say to the family, if you go to the movies, back when we went to movies, do you point out to your child the different jobs that are being done. There's a ticket taker. That person has a job. They're taking tickets. You go to the grocery store. That person's working in the butcher shop. They're cutting meat. But pointing out specific jobs that they can see in the community, because when you ask a student what they want to do and you show them pictures, they have no idea. They don't understand the job because we haven't really put it out there for them to be able to see what that job is. When you say, what do you want to be? And they say, I'm going to be a lawyer or a doctor, and the person has autism and a cognitive disability, becoming a doctor or a lawyer, I'm going to ask, how is that going to be achieved? But I think sometimes it's because nobody took the time to help people understand what other jobs were there. So yes, it is the school's responsibility for job exploration. Yes, it is Texas Workforce Commission. But I also think in a very natural way, parents can do this. And that's why when I do a lot of training for different parent groups, and I really push this idea of this starting at a really young age so people can have that vision of the good life. Another one is planning for the good life is definitely teaching self-advocacy. Can I go back to my, sorry, you keep hearing about my wonderful granddaughter, but one of the big things that we're really pushing on her IEP is for her to learn to say no, because she doesn't use any words at this point. But that safety and that self-advocacy is saying no. That self-advocacy is being able to make a real choice. Lots of times parents will call me up and they'll say, oh my gosh, he refuses to wear anything but jeans. And I said, well, is that, what's the problem? Well, we go to church, I want him to be dressed such, in a nice pair of slacks. Well, him saying he only wants to wear jeans is a real expression of self-advocacy. And how important is it? Does everybody wear dress pants? So it's listening to what they're saying. When somebody says what they want and we don't like what we hear, we oftentimes say, no, I don't think so. Well, that's not teaching self-advocacy. But teaching self-advocacy is making choices and somehow explaining why. Another really important thing for planning for the future is building that resume. Talked about building the resume with the student when we said, go and do this volunteer work, do all these things to build that resume, make yourself the person that you're trying to sell. So when we did Graham, his trajectory was his resume, but you've got to build those activities. They don't just happen. And so it's constantly thinking about that resume. It is joining Scouts. Those type of things will lead to that good life. So when I talk about this deal with money and chores, I get a lot of pushback on this because families oftentimes will say, well, I think doing chores around the house are just things that, everybody does. And I get that, but I also want the student to understand that by doing work, you earn money. By earning money, you have things to spend. So, You can do chores for chores as a family member might be just cleaning the room, making the bed, doing your own personal laundry, cleaning up after the meal, emptying the dishwasher. But chores for money could be things like taking the garbage out. So you can do both things. But the reason I put this out with the picture of the girl in the middle is because the person has experiences, natural experiences, they're going to have the skills for employment. Employment is not a school's responsibility alone. It's not Texas workforce alone. It's everybody working as a team. So work means money. Money pays for needs and wants. The more I work, the more money I can have, and the more things I can buy. It's as simple as that. With several of my clients that are older, I meet with them monthly or bi-monthly, and we go over their budget. And we talk about that money and how's that money being spent. But it's not until the student has to spend the money for things they want and need that they understand money. As long as money just comes from mom and dad's wallet or wherever else, then it doesn't mean much. The other thing is people say, well, what about a debit card? And I think a debit card's great if you understand money, but I think you've got to really use the money to understand how to use a debit card. So we talked also, Carla mentioned this before, but I want to talk about what does Texas Workforce, how can Texas Workforce provide support for the person? And the area that Carla had mentioned that's so important is this potentially eligible. And they just have to meet the definition of a student with a disability. And they can get services. They don't even have to open a case with them. But the potentially eligible provides lots and lots of different supports. As I said, I've got some of my clients are in private school, and the private schools don't even tell them about Texas Workforce. And then I work in districts all around the state, and there's some districts within the state that aren't using this wonderful opportunity that Texas Workforce can provide. But the things that they can provide is career exploration, and they'll help with inventories. This student that I'm referring to that was in private school, they did a whole battery of assessments, including situational assessment, all under potentially eligible. With the work-based learning, I have several people that I've worked with that are part of the school districts, and Texas Workforce, through potentially eligible, paid for job coaches to be with them on the school campus because they needed more support, and they actually were doing jobs on the school campus with a Texas Workforce person present. I also I've got some students that are in transition programs in their districts, but in addition, Texas Workforce is doing things with work-based learning when they're not in the transition program. They're also supporting things through Project Search, all different options. And if you don't have access and you don't have information about this, it's something for you really to be checking into. Are you all using the potentially eligible under Texas Workforce in your schools?
For Region 11, you guys, I just put in Natasha Mendenhall's information. She is the potentially eligible counselor, if you will, and that is her contact information. So first name, last name, at TWC is her email, and then that is her phone number. She is anxious to start working with your students that you serve beginning at age 14.
And I think it all depends on the counselor, but I've only worked with wonderful counselors in this area when I work with school districts, because I have contracts with school districts, and then I have 2 private clients that are using it. But they can send them, their pre-ETS program is a bit limited right now because of COVID. But that student I showed you that went to the Empower program in Arkansas, he worked with potentially eligible, and that's how he had so many of the summer experiences. That's how he went to the UNTY summer camp. But apparently there's a big question about what's going to be offered because of COVID this year. Carla, do you have any more insight on that? I only have what I heard from the specific counselors.
Well, they are, I mean, are doing a little bit more. Some of their providers, I know, are offering spring break camps right now, but they are moving forward with some things for the summer. And they're also doing virtual things as well.
That's what I've seen, is a lot of the virtual things, which would work with some students, but if the student has a more significant need, the virtual are not going to be as, work as well. But this is a resource that they are really wanting to provide. So if you're not using it, make the contact to that. And the other thing I'm finding is that families, if again, this session was really geared to a lot to parents, and the parent can even go and access this as well individually. They don't have to go through a school district. Then after they go through the potentially eligible and they're looking for employment, then they go through that's a different line with it. But they'll help with getting jobs. Oh, I want to say one more thing about this too. What we find is when we have a student that's in a transition program, and the transition program may be working for job exploration, and they may not be using this potentially eligible initially, but the student gets a paid job. What we're looking at is we're moving the support from the school district over to Texas Workforce. And then from the very first slide day when we talked about graduation. On my very first day of this training, we talked about eligibility and accountability for graduation. If the student has a job and Texas Workforce is supporting them, they can be graduated. You can end services under two ways. One, they have a job, and two, they have access to services. So using this Texas Workforce is really going to support your graduation for the student, and it's going to give you, they'll meet the accountability for that graduation. So I want to talk a little bit about employment and what training can look like. Again, I've talked about the Texas Workforce, but I also want to talk about what does employment training look like in elementary school. So I've talked about what the parent does. I've talked about what the agencies can do. Now, what does the parent do and what does the school do now to support employment? So in elementary school, the student can be a line leader, a snack handler, a material distributor. But again, we're giving them names that can be for employment. Then complete an application for the jobs. So the students can be learning the idea of applying for a job just by filling in their name or choosing a picture to show the job that they want. So that would be an in-school job. They complete a job application. Then they interview for the job. Interview for the job with more than one student applying for the job. Well, I want to be a line leader and I want to be a line leader. Well, you need to be interviewed. Let's see how it goes. And then the student may not get every job that he or she applies for, because that's employment. So in elementary school, here's the thing that can be done to be teaching employment. Because when I think about accountability for a student that receives special education services, if they're going to graduate through their IEP and they're not going to be taking the assessment, we're looking at employment as the highest outcome for graduation. Really, employment is the highest standard for graduation. Doing time and getting out just because you've aged out is the lowest standard. Well, when in school, for general ed students, their curriculum is based on the TEKS. And that's all. So everything they're doing is working towards that graduation requirement. Well, if a student is going to be graduating through the IEP, then we ought to be thinking about all the way through that we're looking at employment as your highest standard. So if passing the state assessment, earning your academic credits is a standard for some, for many students, employment is the highest standard. So we shouldn't be waiting to be teaching employment. This is why, Christy, when you talked about transition early on, I said, no, transition and outcomes should be starting at a young age. Your outcome is employment, then why are you waiting till you're 14 or in middle school? You should be thinking about it all the way through, just like we do for general ed. In middle school, you can do an in-class or an on-campus job. It can be attendance taker, message delivery, library support, the same thing. Complete the job application. Nobody gets a job unless they apply for a job. Nobody gets a job unless they're interviewed for a job. And so those are skills, those are soft skills, but we need to teach them. When I work and I see in some schools and in some programs is, oh, well, this is our rotation. They have never they're going to now work in the cafeteria. Did they make an application to work in the cafeteria? Were they interviewed for that job? And so it's that idea that they have to go through a process. These are the soft skills for employment. So I think you as district and me as a retired district person have a lot of responsibility to be teaching those skills and not waiting until they're in a transition program. And then for middle school, let's try to increase the time on task. Do things to make sure it's done right. And for them to be doing some self-evaluations of their job. Employment training your freshman and sophomore year. And the reason I have that separated is because in general ed, the students that are in co-op type programs and in employment programs, they typically are just taking their core classes, their freshman and sophomore year. So you're considering transition assessments and learning style to determine the electives that the student might take to promote employment. Again, first day that when I did the training, I talked about employment first, which was passed in 2015 as a memorandum by the legislators saying that you all as district, I still say myself because I think of myself as a district person, we have that responsibility of teaching employment first. That's what the legislators said. So let's look at the courses that they're taking that might promote the employment interests. Concentrate on credit-bearing classes to better develop interest and aptitudes. Take occupational prep classes. That's what's available in general ed. And participate in campus-based jobs if there's time in your curriculum, but there may not be as much time your freshman and sophomore year. Then employment training your junior, senior, and in transition years. I think we're looking again at that community-based vocational instruction. And then when you're out in the community, if possible, try to use the job application that's from the training site. And I say if possible, it's becoming more and more difficult to do that because they're being done online. And it's really hard to figure that out. But if you have an employer, they can help you with that. The student should be interviewed for the job with the employer. It shouldn't be the teacher making a decision as to where they're going. The employer, they should be interviewed by the employer. And again, I think having more than one student apply for a specific job helps that student understand that just because they go in doesn't mean they're going to get the job. and complete a self-evaluation, including what the student liked and what they didn't like about the job. With that self-evaluation, one of the things that I've been doing for years, way before we had the cell phones that you could use for this easy purpose, I used to carry a big video recorder and video the student doing the job and let the student create a bank of videos. Then later, when you're showing the student the different jobs, they can say, oh, I like this one better than that one. But it's hard for a student to go back in time and say what job they liked. So doing those videos is really helpful for the student for self-evaluation, but it's also a really good way to, if you're later helping a student get a job, you can show a potential employer what the student can actually do. And then paid employment. When it's, again, a lot of this is geared to the parent. When the student gets paid employment, I talk to the parents about beginning to pay for their room and board. All my clients who have jobs across the board, if they're still living at home, are paying for 50%, or paying typically 50% of their income goes to their room and board. And yeah, I know about Social Security, but guess what? With Social Security, they're supposed to be using the SSI money to pay for their room and board. So let them start paying for the things that they want, because we want them to understand the more they work, the more money they get, the more things that they can have that they want. And avoid only using their earnings for their wants and not their needs. And another wonderful thing that Texas Workforce can do, and if you're having a challenge in your districts with paid employment and parents not wanting for employment, is that an issue that you sometimes have? That parents are like, yep. That parents say, I don't want my child to work because I don't want them to lose their SSI money. That's where you can do, Texas Workforce provides benefits counseling, and the benefits counseling is, you can see how they can still make more money if they work than if they don't work. And I know Carla has had Sandy Hardy from Imagine Enterprises come out and do trainings on that.
May the 8th and May the 15th, she'll be doing that. That session is available right now on the Region 11 website.
Yeah, and I suggest you attend it. And are you going to record that too, Carla?
I am. It's part of a series that we're doing, Debbie, and I'll just put the title so that these educators can know, and Christy can also know and be able to tell her families about it. But yes, ma'am, we are going to be having that session. It was just put out today for registration.
And see, I said that without even you prompting me, Carla. We're on the same page. The reason I asked if it was going to be recorded is because it's so much information to take in. And I would suggest that if it's recorded, watch it more than once, because it is a lot of information. Sandy does it in a way that's as easy as possible, but it is so much information, but it's well worth it, because employment, we are all defined by what we do and not just by being around there. And also keep in mind that community arrow that I shared with you earlier on, is that if you want to have a quality, good life, it means that you need to have purpose in your life. And so employment's what provides so much purpose. And so with self-advocacy, I think it's really important to be honest about the person's disability. When I talk about this with the students and I talk about their disability, and I say, how many letters are in the word, in the word part of the word dis? And that's 3. How many letters are in the word ability? Well, there's 7 letters in ability. There's more than twice as many letters in ability than there are dis. So why are we always concentrating on the dis? Let's talk about their abilities, and their abilities are there, and their dis can get in the way of their ability, but be honest about it. And I don't want to say attend their ARD meetings, participate in their ARD meetings in any way. And the idea, again, I'm going to go back to that LifeCourse Trajectory. It really helps you understand what accommodations you need and for them to ask for their accommodations. The person should know how to ask for help and not just say, I need help, but I need help and this is the help I need, instead of just help. Well, what can you do? What can't you do? The students should be requesting their accommodations because no one else is going to request those for them. I work again a lot in the area of employment with my private clients, and we talk about those accommodations, and I talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and when do you acknowledge that you that you need the accommodation? So, but knowing what those accommodations are, and there it is, become educated on the Americans with Disabilities Act, because that's what they're going to be relying on, whether they're going to college or whether they're working. So they need to know what that act is. Identify the supports that they need at college or on the job. Help them look up and understand. Think College has really good information on that as well, and great information for parents to understand what are the supports that are needed at the specific colleges. Interview with students with the student support services at the prospective colleges. Know who those people are. I also want building that resume, and the type of things you want to build in the resume are showing leadership qualities, develop opportunities for leadership, that you know, help people do things to show their leadership, develop volunteer experiences, join community and school clubs. What you're really doing is you're just creating this story. You're creating a story that's going to tell people about how great you are. That's what we did with that student that went to Empower. We created his story over time. We really wanted to build on the strengths. If they're music, artistic, sports, you want to build on the strengths they have. One of my friends had twins, and one of the twins was like giftedly smart, and the other one was just just always was behind, and but he was a great artist. So what she did was she had the great artist one do Christmas cards every year. He would make and draw the Christmas card, and the family would send out that Christmas card with his artwork. So people couldn't wait to get one of his artistic Christmas cards. But we built on the strengths that he had, because everybody saw the strengths his brother had, but not him. And remember, independence versus interdependence. Independence is not measured by the number of tasks a person can do without assistance, but the quality of life a person can lead with assistance. I love that quote when we're thinking about transition. And it really bothers me that this is from 1990, yet it seems to me as if it still seems like such a futuristic thing to say. We've been talking about this for a long time. Why are we not further? But we have to be remembering that it's okay to need help, but we have to teach the person that it is okay. And none of you is independent. No one at this presentation is independent. We all have a quality of life that we know we have to ask for help. Oh, I left 2 minutes for questions, sorry. But does anybody have any questions, concerns? Is there anything else that I can add? My contact information, you can contact me by phone or email if there's, and I do have a website. Questions? You're muted, Carla.
I've been dropping lots of things in the chat for you guys, and so hopefully you were able to see them, and they will also be on the regional website. You're welcome, Kiara. Thank you for coming. What questions do you guys have? It's a lot of information.